So ladies, I thank you guys for hopping on today. It's certainly been a turn of events. As many of you know who may be watching, there was an epic decision by the Supreme Court yesterday that overturned the ruling of Roe versus Wade. For those who are not familiar with the details of the ruling, this came about based on a case that was submitted to the Supreme Court. It was Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health, and Dobbs represented the Department of Health for Mississippi. And they questioned whether or not Jackson Women's Health questioned whether or not the state of Mississippi had the right to put restrictions on abortion that limited to 15 weeks gestation. So it was brought to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court made a historic ruling yesterday, which was leaked. So we kind of all knew that this may be possibly coming, but I think the reality of the decision has hit everyone hardly. So we're going to talk about it. We had planned to have this discussion anyway, but what a timely discussion to have now that this ruling has taken place. So we are honored to have Latoya Mathews on our virtual couch today. Welcome, Latoya.
I'm a healing coach. And so what I do is I help women overcome those traumatic experiences that they've experienced. And we do inside work from the inside out, because it all starts. Healing is a heart matter. So it starts from the heart and just uprooting those things that have really kept you down and kept you from really pursuing your God-given identity and what you are to do in life. And so just really exposing things, just to bring it in a nutshell, helping women expose those things so they can really get the truth and to the root so that they can step into who they were created to be.
I love it. I love it. That's the hard work that a lot of times the health system doesn't really get the opportunity to do. So thank you for explaining that. And as always, we have the other Dr. T on the couch with us today. So ladies, yesterday's ruling really hit everyone hard. The entire world, and not just the nation, but the entire world is really talking about this, because the United States has this view of being sort of the leader in the free world. And so to have freedom restricted has really sent out shockwaves. What were your initial thoughts when you heard about the ruling? We'll start with Latoya.
I'm still processing this. It was something that, we knew probably would or wouldn't happen, but I am honestly still in shock, because I'm originally from Mississippi. I am from the Mississippi Delta, born and raised. And so it just has been one of those things, like, for a moment, can we put aside the labels of pro-life, pro-choice, and just come together as compassionate, loving people? Like, let's remove the labels. Let's just come together as human beings to sit down and actually understand each other.
Right. I love that. I did not know your origins are in Mississippi. Wow.
Yes.
Wow. So you have an understanding of also the social environment of Mississippi, also that may have led to this particular case. Dr. Trissa, what were your initial thoughts as a mom as well?
It was an oh crap. And it was simply because over time, and as Latoya said, still processing, still realizing how much of this is, how many aspects of health and fertility and any of these things are going to be affected. So it's still one of those things where it's like, okay, so now you're going to have a lot of people trying to do things in a harmful way. They're going to go back to trying to find a way to do it, because it's not like people weren't doing it. It's whether or not they can get medical help to do it. You're going to have a lot of people getting themselves hurt. You're going to have a lot of people dying. You're going to have a lot of people dying because they can't make the choice to save their life. Like, it's just been the kind of, okay, what else gets affected? Because it's not just that simple rule. Okay, well, Planned Parenthood can't do it anymore or anything like that. It's just what kind of comes along with it. What are all the parts that are going to be affected by now having this ruling? And there's just so many other crazy things that I've been hearing that I never even thought about. Like, it's just, it comes down to being like, I in a bit of shock, but just based on how things are going, I guess you really can't be too surprised.
Right, right. And to your point, ladies, it's kind of a slap in the face for women's health from the perspective of, in the last 2 to 3 years, we've heard about the maternal mortality rate, especially when it comes to women of color, that Black women in particular have a 3 times higher maternal mortality rate. And a lot of people, when they think of maternal mortality, they think of just the actual full-term pregnancy-related complications, but it actually includes all type of pregnancy-related deaths, which includes miscarriages and abortions. So to your point, also is that this has never been, we've known this, right? That it doesn't stop women from making abortion decisions, because it's oftentimes when a woman makes that type of decision, it's because she feels she has no other choice. And so for women who are still in those socioeconomic restraints that ultimately lead to the decisions, or, some type of traumatic event, like rape, like incest, that lead to these decisions, now you're going to have them trying to either travel, maybe by themselves. We're, also going to have women who are going to unfortunately try to do this on their own. And we have predators, right? Industries that would look to try to sell women medications that are unsafe for them to take on their own. Yeah, so it's not that women are not going to have abortions. They're going to look for other opportunities to have this abortion that they feel is their ultimate choice. And unfortunately, my concern is that there are going to be that predator population that are going to take advantage of women who are desperate and lead them into situations that may lead to maternal deaths, to an increase in maternal deaths. What's interesting is that the stats, so a lot of people are talking about, well, the numbers of babies that are being killed, and the stats actually showed that since the initial decision of Roe versus Wade, that there has been an actual decline, with a few exceptions, with certain bumps in like 2019, 2018, 2017, depending on whose stats you're looking at. Overall, there's been a downward trend. So from Roe versus Wade time period, which is 1973, the estimated, based on whoever you're looking at, these stats may go from 1.4 million to 1 million at that time, and down to currently closer to 600,000 to 900,000, depending again who's the source of the stats and who's included in those statistics. But ultimately, there's been a significant decrease over time. And it's just interesting that this decision is coming when we're starting to see that type of a trend. So you ladies mentioned that this can be have more of a domino effect. So what are some of the things that you're concerned about, maybe not directly related to abortion, but maybe a secondary outcome as a result of this? We talked about maternal mortality. Anything else that we should be considering?
For me, it is, making a ruling and not have the proper resources in place. And, as we talked about, especially when it comes to like the incest and rape, and it's like we expect her to carry a child, but not provide the psychological, mental help for her in carrying, the child. And for every action, there should be a plan of action in place to offset the things that we're seeing happening.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what a lot of people are saying in terms of, is this really pro-life when you talk about the labels? Because I think there are a lot of people who are supportive of women making decisions about their own life and their own bodies, and not necessarily pro-abortion. But because we have these strict labels where people feel like they're falling into one versus the other, you have this kind of conflict of people trying to figure out, well, whose category do I fit into? And one of the ongoing critique for the pro-lifers or towards the pro-life group is the fact that there has been this lack of consistency when it comes to being truly pro-life. So truly pro-life is not just being pro-life about the unborn child, but actually being pro-life about the mom. And I like that point Latoya brought up, that what about mom? What about her life? What about her recovery? What about her trauma? What about her experience of carrying a baby that she may become disconnected from? So we often see that, unfortunately, in my field, when there's some type of undesired pregnancy. It doesn't always have to be traumatic, that moms can disconnect from the pregnancy. And as we talked about in a prior episode, where we talked about trust with Dr. Black, the onset of trust for a baby and for a child starts within the first 3 years. So the maternal experience within those immediate years can affect a child long-term experience when it comes to relationships and psychological health. So thank you for bringing up that point. Anything else that you thought about, Dr. Trissa, about the ultimate sort of domino effect, cataclysmic effect of this particular decision?
Well, some of the things that are more on the health side, or I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but all the discussions being had now about the fact that for people who are going through IVF, if it is that they only implant a certain amount of the embryos, that it would be considered along the same lines as killing or abortion or whatever, to not implant the rest of them. And then that can become an issue where somebody might want to sue them because they felt like they aborted the other kid. And it's just going down the line. So now you have someone who is struggling, is trying to use the means of in vitro fertilization because that may be the last resort. And trust me, if they're at that point in time, it is the last resort. They're there, they've now gone through and spent time, and it's like the option becomes, I either become octomom or I have to then face probably legal challenges because I've chosen to just implant 2 of these embryos versus that. It will then limit people's choices because now people are going to want to protect themselves more and not even go down that line. And so now we have people who have less choice in creating their family and what they desire to do.
Listen. Thank you for bringing that up, because that's something people don't really talk about, is that there are all these other discussions coming up about that ultimately lead to a legal control of a woman's body. And that's really what we're getting onto. I think what has really hit people hard is not just the abortion topic, but that this is truly about more control than it is care. And all these other elements are also brewing that people are not considering. So a lot of people who are in support of this decision, they're not only thinking of the grand scheme of things of what this can potentially lead to. So we talk about legal cases, and I'm sorry, I didn't realize we were going to be doing this discussion this time. I should have brought on one of my lawyers to explain sort of I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to pretend to be a lawyer, but I know they're probably going to be watching this going, girl, the legal point of that is, however, in my very simple understanding of it, is that the legal cases set precedents, right? And so once you have a case that overturns a 50-year-old decision, then that opens up I think what has made people so unsettled is the potential of overturning of so many other things, from voting rights, which is already on the table. What people don't realize that's also on the table is the protection of protesters. So if they decide or rule that protesters can or do not need to be protected, then yeah, the violence against Black and brown people who are protesting can be increased and otherwise justifiable. The other thing that's on the table currently, everyone's talking about it, is gun protection laws on the backbone of just increased violence. So there's so many aspects to this, so many aspects to the control of women. And there are companies that are out there that are now paying for women to travel to other states if they need to. And it's a lot of the big companies. It's not a lot of companies considering how many companies are out there, but it's a lot of the big name companies that are doing this. And the list, you guys can find a list on social media. You can find a list on the internet. But it's just interesting the lengths that people are going to now to try to find solutions. And it's just really sad, because I think we all kind of feel vulnerable. People oftentimes forget that even slavery is still in the Constitution. Slavery is still allowable. There's an exception for slavery in the Constitution, and it's called mass incarceration. Look it up, look into it. So I think for especially Black and brown people, it leaves us in a space of vulnerability. So how do we counter this feeling of vulnerability? Healing coach, help us. How do we counter feeling so vulnerable by a decision such as this?
I think we really have to create a space, where we can come and have open dialogue without judgment. And because that is one of the things that really helped me to heal, being able to be vulnerable and have love and compassion in the state that I was in. And I think when we really sit down and understand the reason, understand why the decision wants to be made, having understanding and really just being there, as the Bible says, love yourself, as you love your neighbor, love your neighbor. And it's a lot of things that we continue to do where we're not showing love, to others. And for me, that is what speared my healing journey, just having that love and compassion. And I think we live in a world that lacks love and compassion. And vulnerability only works in a safe space.
Right.
In a safe, trusted space.
Yes. Latoya, you mentioned that this topic is personal to you. Can you go through, because one of the misconceptions about abortions is that it's a go-to, especially when it comes to Black and brown women, because unfortunately Black women have a higher rate of abortion. It's 38% of the last stats I looked at versus I think 31% for white women. Black women, as you know, we have very unique experience being the most marginalized as female and as Black. What was it like for you to make that decision, knowing these stereotypes, knowing these type of statistics, or did you even consider them at the time?
I didn't consider. Being from Mississippi. Mississippi is one of the poor states in the country. And there isn't a lot, there. And honestly, when I did get pregnant, I had a lot going on at that time. I was starting college, had just graduated high school, and I had 2 scholarships. And me and my husband has talked about this. I had never even heard of abortion. The only way I came to know was that because some of the parts of it I just don't remember. But if I am thinking correctly, she gave me a pamphlet. Like, I had never even heard of abortion. And so I knew that it was like I wasn't in the right environment. And so when she gave me that pamphlet, the decision was clear for me at that moment, because I knew that I had told myself, right, that I had school that I was about to start. I didn't at the time felt like I had a good relationship with my mom. I knew that I didn't want to be on welfare. There was all these things to consider. And again, I hadn't never even heard of abortion. I was introduced to abortion. Because where I'm from, it's just like you get pregnant, you have the kid. That's what happens. But being in the state that I was in, I was like, okay, this is going to be my best option. Because I didn't have the knowledge of, any other resources. I only knew 2 things, welfare, and for people of color, your grandparents take care of you, right? For majority of the households, you stay with your grandparents.
Yeah.
And it was like, there was going to be 1 or 2 options. And I'm like, now that I have this third decision, I'm going to take the third decision, because at me at that time, being still a child at 18 and being naive, that was the best answer for me, just knowing the conditions that I was in.
And how do you respond thank you for sharing that. How do you respond when women who make decisions like that are labeled with such harsh words like murderer, where you're judged based on that decision? How do you respond to that?
When I have to come from a place of compassion, because I know what it felt like to carry shame and guilt. I know what it felt like to even think bad about myself. And so now when I hear, and that's why I do the work that I do, because God was just like, I want you to tell your story. And the first thought that popped in my mind was, I don't want to be judged. I don't want to be ridiculed. I don't want none of the things that the people have to say. And he brought me to a place. It was like, well, if he loves me and I have to know that I've been forgiven, now it's like, you can't tell me anything that I haven't thought about myself. And so I have to come from a place of compassion, a place of love, the same place where I was meant to receive the healing that I received, to get me to a place of, okay, I know how I felt and I know why I make the decision that I make, and I don't want to feel that again.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so I can give you advice, I can tell you, but I'm ultimately still going to give you that choice.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You know, and from a Christian standpoint, it's like, I can't force you to be a Christian. All I can do is live a life that makes you want to be a Christian. I can't force anything on you, but I'm just going to live my life and tell my story in hopes that it helps you make the decision that, you know, whether you keep it or whether you choose to go, I'm still going to be there. I'm going to be there with love. I'm going to be there with compassion, because I don't believe in holding it over someone's head that they have to have that guilt and shame for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, and I have, thank you for saying that, because I have definitely walked with women who have felt traumatized even after, not because the procedure was traumatic, because it includes even women who utilize the pill form, but just the traumatic experience of dealing with their feelings and their emotions afterwards. And I think a lot of people don't realize that women do go through a grieving process, and it looks variable. Some women are able to bounce back and they kind of, you know, able to process pretty quickly. And for other women, it can take a lifetime for them to recover, sometimes from this experience, if they don't receive the support that they need to really process immediately. So what was the recovery like for you?
It was a long road, because I did deal with suicidal thoughts. I was just ready to give up on life. I have a 15-year-old daughter, and even just having her, when she was like 2 weeks old, my mom was here to help me with her. I've since moved to Georgia now. And my mom came to help me with her. And no one had ever told me about postpartum depression, you know, postpartum things that happen postpartum. And so she was crying, and I couldn't get her to stop crying. But when my mother held her, she stopped crying. And I immediately ran out to my car, called my husband, and I said, she doesn't love me. And he's like, what are you talking about? And, you know, now when I look back, I'm like, to say that a 2-week-year-old didn't love me, but that's how the guilt and the shame, you know, had me feeling like, you know, these are the consequences. But I'm just thankful that I had a pastor who introduced me to The True Measure of a Woman by Lisa Bevere. And in chapter 2, it talked about cleaning out closets. And I knew that was the moment of like God telling me it's time for you to heal. And I remember writing down in that book that it was time to clean out of my closet abortion. And that second question, it was like, well, what do you have to offer to other people? And I immediately burst into tears, because I said, I don't have anything to offer to anybody, because that was the mindset that I had from that decision. And I remember not wanting to tell the people, the ladies that were in the group, but I was like, okay, it's a small group, so I'm going to take the chance to tell. And my pastor heard what I had to say. And she said, sweetie, God forgave you the very first time that you prayed. And it was like the gift that I didn't know that I needed. And she didn't even know at the time that I had this pain in my stomach. And when she told me that I had been forgiven, I haven't felt that pain anymore, because it was like the shame and the guilt was causing the pain that was on the inside, because I was holding it in. And that recovery has been having a supportive group of people that literally loved the hell out of me, because there was just so much that was happening on the inside. But having a husband who, you know, continued to love me, having pastors that saw me day in and day out. I was actually talking to my pastor today, and she was, telling me, about what her husband had said about all those moments where I would cry. And she, would tell me that she saw death in my eyes. And I knew that she wasn't lying, because I was just ready to give up on life. Mm-hmm. And finally, my husband, now that my daughter's older, when she was about 12, he was like, does she know exactly what it is that you do? And I was like, I don't know. And so we call her downstairs, and we're talking to her, asking her if she knows what abortion is. Because I would just believe in having the conversation, because at 12, 13, she's already probably having conversations in school that, are way beyond what needs to be spoke about anyway. So it's like, now is the time, because I didn't have the opportunity to have those conversations when I was coming up. Maybe if I would have, things would have been different. But now that I have the opportunity, I'm going to have the discussion with her. And so we had the discussion, and afterwards, she gave me another gift after even the healing started. And she was like, well, I'm glad you chose me. And it was like water to my weary soul. I didn't know that I needed. And it was just like another level of unconditional love that came from her to hear her say that.
Wow.
So just recovering has just having that support group, not judge me, but just continue to speak life into me, and just, have compassion for me.
Right. I love that. I love what you said in terms of the symptomatology of unhealed wounds. The fact that a lot of people are having different types of symptoms, whether it's reflux symptoms, pain symptoms, and don't really realize the correlation between their psychological health and their physical health. So thank you for highlighting that point as well, and for explaining your journey. If you were to say to someone who is in that space now, who has that unhealed wound, who has been dealing with either maybe they have tried to share their story and they've been judged or condemned for it. There is, also from a faith-based perspective, the indirect condemnation on the pulpit as well. So women are oftentimes, they hear a lot, they feel a lot, and they are stuck. How do they get out of being stuck in those emotions?
To get out of being stuck, we have to be able and willing to try again. I know it's like, even for that person, it's like one failed relationship doesn't mean that all relationships will fail. And looking at it with a different perspective. And yes, I can say that now because I'm like out of it, right? But for that lady who's going through it now, there are people, Dr. Moore, Dr. T, myself, that provides a safe space for you to come and speak. And because shame will keep us from sharing. And being able to openly share, to say, I understand what you're going through. And guess what? To the woman who is still feeling shame because people have told her, well, you should feel guilty. No, if you don't feel that way, that's okay.
That's a good point.
Come from both sides to say, whatever you're feeling is valid. And if you feel nothing, then that's okay too. You're still a good person. You're still loved. You're still wanted, and you are seen. And take the step to reach out again. Reaching until you reach the person that is willing to accept you with open arms and love you. And I think that's where, and even as coming from the church, and when I think about it, I always go back to Luke 7. And in Luke 7, there was this woman who went in, the woman with the alabaster box, who went in and washed the feet of Jesus. And all the Pharisees saw was her sin. But Jesus saw her as a woman that just needed to be loved and forgiven. And if we can come from that place, we can have women that show up, not just every Sunday and leaving the same, but we can have women that show up and actually be healed so that they can go be the disciples that we're called to be. If we can, religion looks at the shame, religion looks at the sin. But Jesus looks at the love. What are you willing, to give? Because we're not perfect, and God doesn't expect us to be perfect. And we have to come out of the religious state and come into relationship. And so I'm not looking at your sin. I'm looking, and I always say, I know where I stand, but in these moments, I'm not pro-life or pro-choice, I'm pro-you. I care about your soul. I care about you being healthy, to enter into the world, to be a healthy mom, to be a healthy friend, to be a healthy coworker, to be a healthy business owner. I'm looking at your soul.
Yeah.
Because we've done enough of ourselves, shaming ourselves to be in the place that we are in. And so my job, I feel like, is to be able to love those that are considered outcasts, to love the murderers, because it says by the love that we show, people will know that we are his disciples. So I'm coming from a place of love and compassion, and I want you to reach out.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. I totally think that oftentimes from the faith-based perspective, we're focusing so much on the condemnation and not on the love. And our goal and if you look in the Bible and you ask someone, what is our role when it comes to other people's sin? Find me a scripture that tell us that we have a role when it comes to other people's sin. Our role is to love one another. And so it's interesting with this particular issue that it's oftentimes justified from a Christian perspective, these types of rulings. But when you look at not just the outcome of these decisions, but sort of the efforts that are made to support women, they're lacking. They're not there. It's only this decision to control. And there's lots of theories out there. I've seen lots of theories as to why this decision was made. But at the end of the day, it's more controlling. What's interesting is that when you look at from the biblical perspective, Jesus lived a life of being free, of freeing. And his whole purpose was coming to set the captives free. So nothing about the Bible says that he forces his decision on you. He's so gentle. Everything about this has been forceful, condemning, but yet puts the label of Christianity on it. So I think it just gives Christianity just such a false narrative. And I'm not going to go into that aspect, but I'll just mention it briefly. Perhaps one of the reasons why people are turning away from the church because of the misrepresentation or understanding of what the Bible really says. And people, you guys know I've said this, people don't be studying what the word actually says, what it says, but utilizing portional scriptures out of context.
Right.
Justify personal views. Yeah, we're going to leave that one right there. But,
right there. But listen. Right there.
The things I have heard. I'm like, okay. But that being said, how do we move forward from this? One of the things that Latoya said that I thought really, really highlighted sort of our lacking in women's health, to me, a failing of the women's health, maternal infant sector is information. And this came up on a panel I was on just last week. The fact that I feel like for a lot of our minority groups that somehow the information doesn't get out there. The resources don't get out there. So people feel like I don't have an option because I don't know of any other resource. So I'm glad that you brought that up, Latoya, because I feel like that's one of the things that we need to and should be doing better. And you would think with the internet that the resources would get out there, but it's still somehow a barrier that seems to prevent information from getting to our sisters. So anything else that you ladies have thought about in this new environment where states can now make their own decisions, and certainly some states have already, I think, was it Ohio, that already had a trigger law. I think it was a trigger law that's already activated. Correct me if I'm wrong. I will correct myself in the text of this video. But I think it was Ohio that had a trigger law that activated immediately after this decision. So we're expecting an immediate rollout of restrictions across up to maybe even 26 states. So how do we help women who are in situations Because like I said, a lot of the laws do not make allowances for incest, for rape, truly traumatic events. But I don't want to say that that's the only traumatic experience that women have. Poverty is a traumatic experience for a lot of people. And the memories of poverty and wanting better for their children and the experience of poverty and perhaps still in poverty. How do we help women who are really trying to make that hard decision? It's hard.
Yeah, and in all honesty, just thinking about what Latoya was saying, you know, being that support and coming out of a place of compassion and love. I mean, it'll be hard pressed for you to know what somebody else is going through. You may be able to sympathize, but not necessarily empathize. You may not be able to feel exactly what they're going through. But the point is, you don't need to put your labels on them. You need to just support them where they are. So for those of us who may be on this side of it, where we're not having to consider, we have not had to consider, you support those that are going through, you be the safe space for it. Because we know that there's going to be the need for that. As clinicians, you are open and you listen. And that's the one thing that I think of, whether it's trauma from abuse or anything. I try to make my interactions with patients and with people just clean and open enough so that they feel comfortable enough to tell me what they want to tell me. I can be that sounding board. I can be that ear. I can be that shoulder. I can take it. It's not going to hurt me. It's not going to offend me. I can take it. You can tell me. I can be the trusted space. So for a lot of us, I think we need to learn what it looks like to be a trusted space, and maybe even doing more trauma-informed training so that we know how to support better. Because the thing about it is, there's a difference in the way that you would approach it. I haven't done it yet. I'm in the works, but literally, these are some of the things that I think of. How we get to support people as they're going through whatever the tasks are in life. Because we do know, just like Latoya was saying, she had that pain in her stomach. We see people that come in all the time and they're having all these chronic issues, and they have no idea that because they've been holding on to things so much that their body is now showing the evidence of it. And then I'm coming as a therapist and I'm trying to help you work on this part or work on that part. And I'm like, I know there's so much more, but I can't push you until you're ready to tell me. And until you're ready to tell me, or you're ready to tell someone, we're going to be going through this cycle over and over and over again. So we'll just take our time and we'll wait and be that safe space. And when they're ready, the healing will come.
Yes, I love that. Oh my gosh. Yeah. There's so much I can even say on that. A UTI is never just a UTI. Not in my office. and to be that proactive space, I think, is really important, so that people know you're safe here, because it may not be the first visit as a clinician, it may be the second visit, but always making yourself open to receiving and making time, because we know there's a time factor. We got 15 to 20 minutes and our admin is telling us your productivity, but you know, you may be the only, speaking to anyone in these positions or any positions, you may be the only opportunity, that one instance, to be in tune with someone where they're able to disclose that type of information, release this type of burden. And you don't have to even be in a clinical setting. Sometimes you may just be sitting in church sometimes, you know, and just being open to receiving what people have to share without judgment.
Exactly. And I will also say, you know, having the resources, because I don't think, you know, even in our community, we don't have the resources. And so being able to openly share, like, don't keep information to yourself, like share the information so that we can heal together. Like, you know, there's no shame in healing together. And one thing that I am working on is to form a nonprofit for those that have experienced maternal trauma, and be there for moms, to be there for families, to be there and provide the support that they need. And I think we have to push past the fear, push past the limitations that we have, and start creating things for ourselves where we can show up for each other.
I love that. I love that. I love that. So being proactive, utilizing our own skill set, our own resources to then help others. And we are creative thinkers. We're creative. Okay. Can we talk about the pyramids? That tells you we are creative, skillful people. We will make, listen, $1 out of 15 cents, literally. So utilizing, not sitting on our tails and waiting for somebody else to do it. Because look, they have not done it for how many years in this country? They have not done it. They're not going to do it. It is, I love that you brought up that point, Latoya. It is up to us to do it for ourselves, to make those avenues, create those resources, and do it together as a group, because that's just how we're built. We're built on community. We've always been that way as a people. So utilizing our own resources and creating our own solutions. So I love that you're doing a nonprofit to help with maternal trauma. We've talked about this too on this panel, all sorts of maternal trauma, from unexpected outcomes, to childbirth trauma. So there is definitely a need for that, to pregnancy losses, or even just a single pregnancy loss can create a traumatic experience. So thank you for doing that, for taking that mantle, and definitely keep us posted on that. And for all those who are watching this episode, if you have questions, if you're processing, we will process this together. The ladies have mentioned that they are still processing this. I'm still processing. I'm processing through anger. I will admit, I'm not going to sleep on my anger, but I am angry about it. But I'm going to utilize my anger in ways of creating solutions. I'm disappointed. I'm hurt as a woman. I'm hurt that, people have joked about The Handmaid's Tale. I haven't watched the series. I've made jokes about it based on what people have shared with me, but people are really feeling like this is a Handmaid's Tale and we're moving backwards when it comes to women's rights and freedom. And I find it just so interesting that the first set of laws that are up for rulings and decision has to do with a woman's body. There's now a pending decision about our ability to utilize birth control. Ooh, that one had to make me take a whole breath, y'all. I had to take a whole breath on that one, because we're cutting off a woman's options, but then we're also making it more likely that she's going to need those options. It's just, you can't make this up. You can't make this up. So we're going to keep our leadership in prayer. Also, church, because some divine intervention. But yeah, there's a lot going on, and I don't want women to feel despair like we have no options. We always have options. There is always a way through. And so thank you, ladies, for being on this discussion today. Take the time to process.
Peace be with you. Peace be with you. I don't want to say may the odds be ever in your favor. That's a little, drastic, but I'm like, peace be with you, because
Yes. I mean, it's just, I'm interested to see where this goes. And I'm bracing myself.
One word.
I'm bracing myself to see where this goes. But I agree. I think we're all kind of stunned in processing. And sort of like, where do we go from now? I'm not surprised, but I guess I'm just disheartened. And I don't want people to be discouraged, because I've seen that a lot on social media, that people feel so discouraged that the protesting don't work and all that stuff. And on that note, I will say, put more effort in voting than you do protesting. Protesting is great, but if you don't show up to vote, this is what happens, people. But I'm not going to get political. This is not a political platform. I'm just saying, an option to change is raising your voice. Your voice is important. Your vote is important. Regardless of how you feel on this issue, everyone needs to raise their voice and vote, especially for those of us who are the most marginalized, because we're the most affected by these decisions. So that being said, thank you, ladies, for being on this hard topic. Very hard topic, you guys said. Thank you so much, Latoya, for joining us and for healing us in the process. With your words and for sharing your personal experience. And I love that you're so bold about it. I think it's going to encourage people, other women, to feel like it's okay and there is a safe space and they're okay and they're normal and they're human and they're not all these things, intrusive thoughts that sometimes come into our minds. So thank you for opening up that door. Thank you, Dr. Trista, as always, for sharing your input and insight on these topics. And Latoya, if folks want to follow you and find out when you drop in this nonprofit.
And when you preaching next.
And when you preaching next. How can they find you? What is your preferred method of contact?
I am on Instagram and Facebook, and on Instagram and Facebook, I am the Latoya Mathews, THE, and that's Mathews with 1 T. So the Latoya Mathews, and you can also go to my website, latoyamathews.com. I do have a retreat that I have every year in September. This year we're sold out, but we'll have a waiting list for next year. But you can find me there, and me saying that was my accountability to get it done, and so, with the nonprofit. So now I have to follow through. And so, but you'll be able to find out about that on social media as well.
Love it, love it, love it. And Dr. Trista, where can they find you? I love the accountability. Listen, that's what we do.
Yes.
I can be found at Instagram, tristajob.dpt.
Awesome. And as always, ladies and gents, I am Dr. T, the hand behind the handle of Healthy Bump Club. Thank you for joining us and having this critical conversation. Make sure you comment below, share your thoughts with us. Let's process together as a community. And as always, thank you for watching. Don't forget to share. Hit that, see that arrow that goes that way? That's your share icon. Make sure you hit that icon. Get this information in front of the social media crowd, in front of the virtual population, so that they know that we are here and we are sharing these information. Also, if you are joining us, I'm heading to Essence. So if you are part of Essence and you're watching this video, make sure you click a like, but guess what else? Subscribe. Go ahead and subscribe to our channel. Look at we have left you guys a basket of information on all sorts of topics. Make sure you go through our topics, flip through the topics and watch and share your comments there as well. Thank you, ladies, for joining, sharing our community on Healthy Bump Club here on YouTube, but also check us out on Instagram. You will meet us at where? healthybump.club. And that's where you will find our quick clips. We leave a lot of really critical information, whether it's on physical health, mental health, OBGYN health, obstetrical health, name it. We talk about it all. And that's where you will find our quick clip information. And head over to our stories, because that's when we go down. We have a good time as moms to be, as aunties that are supporting these environments. And then when you're done there, go on and purchase one of our apparel. That's right. We are creating a community of villagers, because it takes a village. All right. And so because we have such great supporters who watch us all the time, who may be done with childbearing, but love and support our mission. And we thank you guys. You are the inspiration behind our apparel line. So thank you for that. And we will see you when? Next episode. Bye, y'all.